It was one of those gray, silent mornings in Oregon where even the wind seemed too sad to blow. The church bell tolled slowly, echoing across the small town as people gathered to say their final goodbye to Eleanor Hayes, a woman everyone knew, yet few truly understood. She was 68, a retired nurse who had spent her life caring for others, especially those no one else would. Her kindness was legendary, her smile gentle, and her house always smelled like cinnamon tea and fresh bread. Inside the church, the air felt heavy. The wooden pews were filled with neighbors, old patients, and a few distant relatives. Soft crying filled the room like background music. In the front row sat Michael Hayes, Eleanor's only son, mid-30s with sharp features and tired eyes. He wore a black suit that looked slightly too big on him, as if it belonged to a younger, happier version of himself. He stared blankly at the coffin, his jaw tight, his hands trembling slightly. People noticed that he hadn't shed a tear, not one. Some whispered that maybe he'd grown distant from his mother after his father died years ago. Others said grief had frozen him, but the truth was, nobody knew what was going on inside Michael's heart. The priest began to speak softly, his voice trembling with emotion. Eleanor Hayes was a woman of grace, compassion, and faith. His words floated through the church, wrapping around the mourners like a sad melody. Outside, dark clouds gathered, and the faint sound of thunder rumbled in the distance. The world seemed to mourn with them. As the priest raised his hand to offer the final blessing, the heavy wooden doors of the church slammed open. The sudden noise startled everyone. The wind rushed in, scattering papers and making the candles flicker violently. In the doorway stood a young man, drenched from the rain, chest heaving, eyes wide with panic. His clothes were torn, his hands muddy, and his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the church like a thunderclap. Everyone froze. The priest's hand hung mid-air. The crying stopped. Even the storm seemed to pause. The stranger stumbled forward, pointing a shaking finger at the coffin. "Don't bury her," he gasped between breaths, his voice cracking with desperation. "She's still breathing." For a moment, silence consumed the room, thick, tense, unreal. Then murmurs erupted. A woman fainted. Someone shouted, "What's going on?" Michael stood up abruptly, his face pale, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. The stranger's eyes locked onto his. "I'm telling you," he said, trembling, "your mother is alive." Everyone turned toward the coffin. The sound of rain against the windows grew louder, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Was this grief playing tricks on them, or had death just made a terrible mistake? Gasps filled the church as whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave of panic. The stranger, dripping rain onto the old wooden floor, looked wild, desperate, but there was something raw in his voice that made people hesitate before dismissing him. Michael took a cautious step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling despite his effort to stay calm. The young man, no older than 25, struggled to catch his breath. "My name's Daniel Carter," he said, wiping the rain from his face with a shaky hand. I work at the county hospital." The priest frowned. "Son, this is a funeral, not a place for pranks or madness." But Daniel shook his head violently. "I'm not lying. I saw her, Eleanor Hayes. She was taken to our morgue 2 days ago. But when I was closing up last night, I heard something." His voice broke. "I heard knocking from one of the drawers." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. A few people gasped. Someone cried out, "That's impossible." Michael's knees felt weak. His mother alive? It couldn't be. He'd seen her cold, pale body himself. He'd signed the death certificate. Daniel's voice grew more frantic. "I opened it. She was inside. Her lips were moving. Her chest, it was rising. Barely. But it was." His eyes filled with tears. "She was still alive. But before I could call anyone, they told me her body had already been claimed for burial. I tried to reach you, but nobody would listen." The priest's face went pale. "You mean to tell us this woman might be breathing right now inside that coffin?" he whispered. Daniel nodded helplessly. Michael's body went cold. Without thinking, he rushed to the front of the church and grabbed the coffin lid. His hands shook violently as he looked back at the priest. "Open it," he said hoarsely. "Michael, this is madness," someone shouted, but Michael didn't care. "Open it!" he roared. 2 men came forward hesitantly and helped him lift the lid. The hinges creaked, echoing through the church like a scream. Inside lay Eleanor Hayes, peaceful, pale, her hands folded across her chest. The smell of roses mixed with something colder. Final. Michael's breath caught. "Mom," he whispered. Her face was still, her lips slightly parted, but Daniel leaned closer, holding his trembling hand above her nose. The entire church leaned in, silent, terrified, waiting for the truth. And then a faint twitch. Daniel gasped. "Look!" he cried. Michael's eyes widened. Her finger, it moved. The priest stepped back, crossing himself. A woman screamed. Panic filled the room as people stumbled over pews to get a closer look. Michael fell to his knees beside the coffin, tears spilling freely for the first time. Mom, oh God, Mom! Daniel's voice shook. She's alive. I told you. She's still breathing. And as thunder cracked outside and rain poured harder than before, Eleanor's chest rose and fell ever so slightly, like the first breath of a miracle no one had believed in. The church turned into chaos. Some screamed, others prayed. The priest dropped his Bible, whispering under his breath, Lord, have mercy, as the flickering candles cast trembling shadows on the walls. Rain slammed harder against the stained glass windows, painting streaks of color across Eleanor's still face. Michael hovered over his mother, his hands trembling. Mom, it's me, he whispered desperately, brushing the wet hair from her forehead. Please, open your eyes. But she didn't respond. Her skin was cold, yet beneath that coldness there was something alive, a faint pulse, fluttering like a trapped bird beneath her wrist. Daniel leaned closer, his breath shallow. She's in a deep coma, he said softly, his medical training taking over. Her body temperature is low and her breathing's shallow. It must have tricked the doctors. I've read about cases like this. They call it suspended animation. The priest's voice trembled. Are you saying she was buried alive? Daniel swallowed hard. Almost. Michael's mind spun. Almost buried alive. My mother. He felt like the floor had vanished beneath him. For 2 days he'd mourned her, planned her funeral, and now she was still fighting for her life. Tears rolled down his cheeks as guilt consumed him. How could I not know? He whispered. How could I just let them take her? The crowd stood frozen, unable to move, watching as Daniel placed 2 fingers against Eleanor's neck. We need to get her to a hospital. Now! Michael looked up sharply. Then help me. With Daniel's guidance, they lifted Eleanor gently out of the coffin. The sound of thunder echoed, as if the heavens themselves were gasping. Her hand slipped from the white cloth, frail, trembling, alive. Michael held it tightly. Hang on, Mom, he whispered through tears. Don't leave me again. Outside, the rain was relentless. Michael and Daniel rushed toward a parked van, covering her with a blanket someone had grabbed from the pews. The townspeople followed in stunned silence, whispering prayers, disbelief, and awe. As they drove through the storm, Daniel kept checking Eleanor's pulse. It's faint, he said, but she's holding on. Michael's eyes stayed glued to her face, every rise and fall of her chest, a fragile miracle. Then, as lightning flashed through the windshield, something incredible happened. Eleanor's eyelids flickered. Just for a moment, Michael's heart skipped a beat. Daniel, did you see that? Daniel turned quickly. I did. He leaned closer, his voice trembling with awe. She's trying to wake up. For the first time in years, Michael felt hope burning inside him, wild, fierce, uncontrollable. He looked up at the stormy sky, tears mixing with the rain. Please, God, he whispered, don't take her from me again. As the van sped toward the hospital, Eleanor's weak hand twitched once more, and Michael's fingers tightened around hers. The faintest whisper escaped her lips, barely audible over the storm. Michael? He froze. His eyes widened in disbelief. Mom? Daniel stared, speechless. The world outside blurred into streaks of rain and light, and inside that van, a miracle began to breathe again. The hospital lights flickered as the storm outside roared on, lightning casting quick flashes across the white walls. Paramedics rushed Eleanor through the emergency doors, her frail body lying motionless on the stretcher. Michael ran beside her, his suit soaked, his heart pounding louder than the thunder. Daniel followed close behind, his mind still reeling from what they had witnessed. Doctors and nurses flooded the hallway as Daniel shouted, severe hypothermia, possible cataleptic coma. She's been declared dead for over 48 hours. The medical staff froze for a split second, disbelief flickering across their faces before they rushed into action. Get her to trauma room 2! One of them barked. Michael stood helplessly as they disappeared behind the swinging doors. He pressed his palms to the glass window, his breath fogging it up. For years he had distanced himself from his mother, blaming her for things she never caused, for choices that were never hers. But now, watching her fight for her life, all he could think was, please, Mom, just wake up. I'm not ready to lose you. Not like this. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm outside began to quiet, but inside the hospital, the tension only grew heavier. A doctor finally stepped out, pulling down his mask. She's stabilized, he said, voice measured. But it's complicated. Michael's heart leapt. She's alive? The doctor nodded slowly. Yes, but she's still in a coma. Her body temperature dropped dangerously low. It's possible her vital signs were so faint they appeared gone. In rare cases like this, especially with heart conditions, the body mimics death. Daniel exhaled in relief. So she really was alive all along. Michael's legs almost gave out. He sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. I almost buried her, he whispered, shaking. I almost buried my mother alive. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. You couldn't have known, son. You're not the first family this has happened to, but you might be one of the lucky few who got a second chance. As they entered the ICU, Michael stood beside her bed. Machines beeped softly, keeping rhythm with her fragile heartbeat. Eleanor's face looked peaceful, too peaceful, like she was sleeping through the noise of the world. Michael reached for her hand. It was still cold, but he could feel life pulsing faintly beneath her skin. Mom, he whispered, voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I thought I lost you, but I never realized how much you held me together all along. His words broke into sobs he couldn't hold back anymore. Daniel quietly stepped closer. You did the right thing, Michael. You listened when no one else would. Michael looked up at him with red eyes. No. You did. He paused, taking a shaky breath. You saved her. Daniel shook his head. She wasn't ready to go. Some people, their souls just refused to stop fighting. A nurse entered, checking Eleanor's vitals. She's stable for now, she said gently. But if she wakes up, and I believe she might, it'll be soon. Michael stayed by her bedside through the night. The rain had stopped, and moonlight slipped softly through the blinds. He held her hand, whispering stories, apologies, and prayers. And just before dawn, when the world outside turned silver and still, Eleanor's eyelids flickered again. Her lips parted slightly, and a faint, broken whisper escaped. Michael. His heart nearly stopped. He leaned closer, gripping her hand tightly. I'm here, Mom. I'm here. Her eyes slowly opened, weak but filled with light. And for the first time in days, Michael felt something inside him break open. Love, regret, relief, all at once. She smiled faintly through her tears. You came back for me. Michael's voice cracked as he whispered, No, Mom, you came back for me. The morning light spilled into the hospital room, soft and golden. The storm had passed, but its echoes still trembled in everyone's hearts. Machines hummed quietly beside Eleanor's bed, each beep a fragile reminder of the life that had been pulled back from the edge of death. Michael hadn't slept. He sat by her bedside, holding her hand as though it were a lifeline. When her eyes fluttered open again, there was a calmness in them, the kind that comes after walking through darkness and finding your way back to light. Michael, she whispered, her voice raspy, fragile. I'm right here, Mom, he said softly, leaning closer. You're safe now. She looked around slowly, her gaze moving to Daniel standing near the door. You brought me back. Daniel shook his head humbly. It wasn't me, ma'am. It was your son. He refused to let go. Eleanor's eyes softened, but there was a shadow behind them, something unspoken. I wasn't supposed to wake up, she murmured. Michael frowned. What do you mean? You had an attack. The doctors said your heart stopped. Tears welled in her eyes. Yes, but it wasn't an accident. Michael's blood ran cold. What? Eleanor turned her head weakly toward the window. The night before I collapsed, I got a letter from your father's old attorney. Daniel straightened, sensing the weight in her tone. Your husband's attorney? She nodded faintly. Your father left something behind before he died. Something he never wanted anyone to find. Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. Dad's been gone for 15 years, Mom. What could possibly? Because he didn't die the way they said he did, she interrupted, her voice trembling. It wasn't an accident. He was killed. The room went silent. Even the steady beeping of the monitor seemed to fade. Michael stared at her, his mind spinning. Mom, that doesn't make sense. Who would? She squeezed his hand weakly, eyes glistening. Because of what he discovered before he died. He found something at his company. Money laundering, fraud, names of people high up. He was going to expose them, but before he could, the car crash happened. Daniel's expression turned grave. You think someone silenced him? Eleanor nodded slowly. And when I started asking questions years later, I began receiving threats. I tried to protect you, Michael. That's why I sent you away. That's why I told you to never come back. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. Mom, all those years, I thought you pushed me away because you didn't love me. She wept quietly. I was trying to save you. When my heart failed 2 days ago, I thought maybe it was finally over, that they'd come for me too. Daniel stepped closer, jaw tight. If that's true, whoever did this might still be watching. Michael's eyes darkened, tears mixing with anger. Then we'll find them. We'll find whoever did this to Dad and to you. Eleanor gripped his hand, her voice barely a whisper. Promise me, Michael. Whatever you do, don't go looking alone. They're dangerous. He nodded slowly, tears falling down his face. I promise. She closed her eyes, breathing shallowly, exhausted by the weight of her confession. The room grew quiet again, just the sound of machines and the faint hum of morning outside. Daniel turned to Michael, his voice low. She just opened a door that's been locked for 15 years. Michael stared at his mother, her frail chest rising and falling. Then it's time we find out what's on the other side. As the first rays of sunlight touched her face, Eleanor whispered one last thing before drifting into sleep, something that would haunt Michael long after. They're still out there, Michael, and they know you're looking. Rain clouds hung low again that evening, wrapping the city in a gray silence. Michael sat in the hospital corridor, Eleanor's voice echoing in his mind. They're still out there, and they know you're looking. Those words wouldn't leave him. Daniel stood nearby, his arms crossed, thinking. We need to find that letter, Michael finally said, breaking the silence. If Mom was telling the truth, it could explain everything. Daniel nodded. She said it came from your father's attorney. Do you remember his name? Michael hesitated. Robert Hensley. He used to visit when I was a kid. Daniel pulled out his phone and searched quickly. Robert Hensley died in 2012. Heart attack. Michael exhaled sharply. That's convenient. They exchanged a tense glance. Daniel leaned closer. If he sent her a letter before she collapsed, it must still be at her house. We'll go tonight. By nightfall, they arrived at Eleanor's old two-story home, the same house Michael had grown up in, now covered in ivy and shadows. The porch creaked under their feet. Inside, everything smelled like dust and lavender. Photos of Michael's childhood lined the hallway, each one a reminder of the life he'd walked away from. They searched her study first. Drawers, bookshelves, old boxes. For nearly an hour, nothing. Until Daniel found something strange. A loose floorboard under the old writing desk. He pried it open carefully and pulled out a small sealed envelope, yellowed with age, with a name written in faded ink. To Eleanor, from Robert Hensley. Confidential. Michael's pulse quickened as he tore it open. Inside were 3 folded pages and an old photograph of his father, standing beside 2 men in suits outside a corporate building. Men Michael didn't recognize. On the back of the photo, written in his father's handwriting, were the words, "If you're reading this, it means they found me." Michael's hands trembled as he read the letter aloud. Eleanor, I've uncovered evidence that the company is laundering government funds through shell accounts. The men at the top, Mason Hale and Arthur Kent, who are behind it. If anything happens to me, know this. They'll make it look like an accident. Don't trust anyone from the board. Keep Michael safe. Burn everything else. The room fell silent. Only the ticking of the old clock filled the air. Daniel looked at him grimly. Mason Hale. That name rings a bell. He's the current CEO of Hale Kent Enterprises, one of the biggest contractors in the state. Michael's voice was low, shaking. That's where Dad worked. Daniel's expression hardened. Then your mother was right. He was killed to protect them. Suddenly, the sound of a car door outside shattered the quiet. Headlights flashed through the window. Michael froze. Did you tell anyone we were coming here? Daniel shook his head. No. Footsteps approached the porch. Slow. Deliberate. The doorknob turned. Daniel motioned silently, pulling Michael behind the curtain. The door creaked open, and 2 figures entered. Dark coats, quiet voices. One of them walked straight toward Eleanor's study, scanning the room. Michael's breath hitched. One man spoke in a low voice. Check everything. She had the letter. If her son found it, we can't risk it going public. Michael's grip tightened on the letter in his hand. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "Back door." Now, they slipped through the kitchen. Every step quiet but heavy. Just as they reached the back door, a flashlight beam swept across the wall. "Hey, stop!" one of the men shouted. Daniel shoved Michael through the door. "Go!" They sprinted into the rain-soaked yard as thunder rolled overhead. Michael clutched the letter to his chest, as if it were his father's heart beating inside it. Shots echoed behind them, wild, sharp, deadly. They didn't stop running until they reached Daniel's car. Breathing hard, drenched and shaking, Michael looked at the letter again. The ink was bleeding in the rain, but the truth was clear now. His father hadn't just died, he had been silenced. And now, they were coming for the only 2 people who knew. Daniel started the car, tires screeching as they sped away. "They know we have it," he said. Michael stared out into the storm, his voice low and burning with resolve. Then let them come. The rain had turned into a steady drizzle by morning. The world outside looked washed out, like it was holding its breath. Inside Daniel's small apartment, Michael sat at the table with the letter laid out in front of him, edges wrinkled, words smudged, but still heavy with meaning. Every line his father had written felt like a message sent from beyond the grave. Daniel placed 2 steaming cups of coffee on the table. "You haven't said a word since last night," he said quietly. Michael rubbed his eyes, exhausted but restless. "Because I can't stop thinking about those names. Mason Hale, Arthur Kent. My dad trusted them, and they killed him." Daniel nodded grimly. "They're powerful, Michael. If your father was close to uncovering something, they won't let this go easily." Michael looked up, his jaw tight. "Then we go after them first." Before Daniel could answer, Michael's phone buzzed. It was from an unknown number. The message read, "Stop digging, or you'll end up like him." Michael's blood ran cold. He turned the screen toward Daniel. "They already know we escaped." Daniel grabbed his laptop, typing fast. "If we're going to take them on, We need proof that can't be denied. Financial records, emails, anything linking Hale Kent to the fraud your father mentioned. Michael nodded slowly, then noticed something on the back of the photograph again. A faint watermark barely visible under the light. Wait, look. He tilted it closer to the lamp. The words HK Executive Retreat 2008 appeared. Daniel's eyes widened. That's where this was taken. Hale's private property, about an hour north of here. Michael clenched his fist. And that's where we'll start. They arrived just after sunset. The estate loomed ahead, a sprawling glass mansion surrounded by pine trees and silence. Security cameras dotted the gates, and the hum of electricity filled the air. Daniel adjusted his jacket. We'll never get through the front. Michael's gaze fell on a narrow service road winding toward the back, half hidden by trees. Then we don't. They slipped through the woods, boots sinking in mud, breath visible in the cold night air. When they reached the rear entrance, Daniel pulled out a small lockpick set from his pocket. College roommate taught me this, he whispered. Within seconds, the door clicked open. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet, too quiet. Expensive paintings lined the halls, and a faint smell of cigar smoke lingered in the air. They moved room to room, searching for anything useful. Then, in a private office, Michael froze. On the desk sat a framed photo, his father, shaking hands with Mason Hale, the same men from the old picture, smiling like old friends. His stomach twisted. Daniel booted up the computer on the desk and started typing. Let's see what's hiding here. After a few tense minutes, the screen filled with folders, encrypted files, financial documents, internal memos. Got something, he muttered. Transfers, hidden accounts, and a list of employees who were terminated, or rather disappeared. One name made Michael's breath catch. Eleanor Hayes, my mother, he whispered. Before Daniel could respond, a deep voice echoed from behind them. I was wondering when you'd show up, Michael. They turned. Mason Hale stood at the doorway, tall, composed, wearing a charcoal suit. His face was older now, but his cold smile was unmistakable. Two security guards flanked him. So you're your father's son after all, Hale said smoothly, stepping closer. Always digging where you shouldn't. Michael's heart pounded, but he didn't move. You killed him. Hale chuckled softly. Your father was a brilliant man. Too brilliant. He found out things that were above his pay grade, and you know what happens when people cross lines they shouldn't. Michael's voice trembled with fury. You made it look like an accident. Hale's expression darkened. We made it look clean. He glanced at the computer. Now you've seen too much. Daniel stepped forward. It's over, Hale. We've got everything we need right here. Hale smirked. Do you really think the police will believe a dead man's letter and a disgraced ex-paramedic? Michael froze. How do you know who he is? Because, Hale said, tilting his head slightly, Daniel wasn't just your father's friend, he worked for me until he didn't. Michael turned toward Daniel, disbelief flooding his face. What is he talking about? Daniel's expression was pained. Michael, I was part of the security team that covered up the crash. I didn't know what really happened until later, until it was too late. Michael staggered back, betrayal cutting deeper than any wound. You knew my father. I tried to make it right, Daniel said quickly. When I saw your mother at the funeral, I couldn't let her be buried alive too. That's why I came back. Hale raised his gun, his voice calm and cold. And now, neither of you will leave this house alive. The tension snapped. Daniel lunged forward just as Hale fired. The gunshot cracked through the silence, glass shattering. Papers flew everywhere. Michael dropped behind the desk, adrenaline surging. He grabbed a metal rod from the fireplace and swung it, knocking the gun from Hale's hand. Daniel tackled one of the guards, shouting, "Run, Michael!" Michael grabbed the letter, the hard drive, and sprinted toward the back exit. Behind him, more gunshots thundered. Daniel's voice echoed through the chaos. Go! Don't stop! Michael burst through the door into the rain, clutching the evidence to his chest, his heart pounding with one truth. His father's murder was only the beginning, and now Daniel's blood was on his hands too. As lightning tore across the sky, Michael looked back at the burning house and whispered, "This isn't over." The night was merciless. Rain hammered against Michael's windshield as he sped down the desolate road, headlights slicing through the darkness. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, Daniel's last words echoing in his ears. "Run, Michael." He'd left the burning mansion behind, but his heart hadn't escaped the fire. The hard drive sat on the passenger seat beside him, its cold metal casing reflecting the dim glow of the dashboard. Inside it, the truth that had killed his father, and now Daniel. Michael pulled over near an abandoned gas station. His pulse still raced, his shirt soaked with blood that wasn't his. He slammed the steering wheel. "Damn it!" His voice cracked in the rain. How many more people have to die? For the first time in years, he felt utterly alone. But as he glanced into the rearview mirror, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Someone was watching, a dark figure, standing under a broken streetlight, unmoving, almost blending with the shadows. Michael's breath hitched. "Who's there?" he shouted, stepping out, rain pouring over him, but the figure was gone. Only the sound of dripping water and his own ragged breathing remained. He returned to the car and opened Daniel's bag. Inside was a small black USB, separate from the hard drive, labeled simply for MH. Michael frowned. For me? He plugged it into his laptop. The screen blinked to life, and a video began to play. It was his father, alive, speaking directly to the camera. "Michael, if you're watching this, then I failed." His father's voice was weary, eyes filled with both fear and love. "They're going to silence everyone who knows the truth about Project Mercy. Don't trust anyone, not the police, not Hale Kent, not even those who claim to help you. But there's one person who can finish what I started. You'll find her at Ravens Point. She knows everything. Her name is Clara." Michael froze. Clara Kent, Arthur Kent's daughter, one of the men responsible for his father's death. Before he could process, his laptop flickered again, the screen glitching. Then a new message appeared. "You shouldn't have opened that." Michael's heart dropped. They were tracking him. Again, he slammed the laptop shut, grabbed his things, and jumped into the car. The night seemed to close in around him. He started the engine, tires screeching as he sped off. Hours later, he reached Ravens Point, an old coastal town shrouded in fog, waves crashing violently against the cliffs. The address from his father's letter led him to a rundown inn overlooking the sea. The air smelled of salt and secrets. He knocked twice on room 12's door. A woman opened it. Early 30s, sharp eyes, cautious posture. "Michael Hayes," she said softly, as if expecting him. "You look just like your father." He blinked in shock. "Clara?" She nodded. "Come in. We don't have much time." Inside, the room was dimly lit. Walls covered with pinned documents, photos, and maps. Everything connecting Hale Kent to the deaths of multiple whistleblowers. Clara motioned to a red folder. "Your father didn't just discover financial fraud, Michael. He found proof that Hale Kent were running illegal medical trials, human experiments under Project Mercy. Your mother was one of their subjects." Michael's heart stopped. What are you saying?" Clara's eyes softened. "She didn't die naturally, Michael. She was part of a test that went wrong. Your father tried to expose them, and they silenced him. When he realized they'd come for your mother, he faked her death to protect her. But someone betrayed him." Michael stepped back, his world spinning. "No, that can't be true." Clara handed him a photo, taken months before his father's death. In it, Eleanor Hayes was alive, standing with a nurse, and Daniel watching from the background. Before Michael could speak, the window shattered. Bullets tore through the room. Clara pulled him down. "They found us," she shouted. Michael grabbed the hard drive and the USB, diving behind the table as gunfire lit up the night. Outside, black SUVs roared up the hill. Mason Hale wasn't dead. He had survived the fire. As Clara reloaded her gun, she looked at Michael. "If we die tonight, the truth dies with us. You have to get this drive to the press in Portland. Promise me." Michael hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." She smiled sadly. "Then go. I'll hold them off." The door exploded open. Clara fired, yelling, "Run!" Michael bolted through the back window, tumbling down the wet slope toward the cliffs. Sirens blared in the distance. His body ached, but he kept running. The hard drive pressed tight to his chest. Behind him, a final gunshot echoed through the storm. Then, silence. Michael turned back once, the inn now ablaze. A single tear mixed with the rain on his cheek. "I'll finish this, Dad," he whispered. "I'll finish what you started." And as lightning split the sky, he disappeared into the fog, the last witness still standing. The wind howled along the Oregon coast as Michael drove north toward Portland, every mile heavy with loss. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside him hadn't. His eyes were red, his thoughts racing. Clara was gone, Daniel was gone, and his parents, maybe never who he thought they were. The hard drive sat beside him on the seat, and the USB still labeled for MH. He replayed his father's words in his mind over and over. "Don't trust anyone. Find Clara. Finish what I started." But now Clara was dead, and the men who had destroyed his family were still out there. By dawn, he reached the edge of Portland. The city lights flickered through the fog as he parked in a deserted lot behind an old news building, the Oregon Ledger. It was once a respected investigative paper, now mostly silent. Inside, the front desk was empty, except for a woman typing under a dim lamp. She looked up when he entered. "Can I help you?" Michael hesitated, then handed her his father's letter. "I have a story, one that people have died for." Her expression changed. She glanced at the signature, "Richard Hayes. You'd better come with me." she said quietly. She led him to the back office, where an older man sat surrounded by files. "This is Ben Carter," she introduced. "He was your father's editor." Ben's eyes widened the moment he saw Michael. "God, you look just like him. We thought he was killed in that car accident." "He was," Michael said grimly, "but not the way you think." He placed the USB and hard drive on the table. "My father left this. It's proof of what Hale Kent were doing." Ben inserted the drive into his computer, frowning as he scrolled through folders. Names, payment records, photos, classified memos. "Jesus," he whispered, "if this is real, it could bring them down." "It's real," Michael said quietly. "People died for it." Then Ben clicked on a file named confessiontape.mp4. The screen flickered. The video was old, grainy, showing a small hospital room. In it sat Arthur Kent, one of the two men responsible for Project Mercy, speaking directly to the camera. "This is Arthur Kent. If you're seeing this, it means Mason has gone too far. The experiments were meant to save lives, not destroy them. Eleanor Hayes, she wasn't supposed to die. She was revived. The serum worked, but Mason covered it up because he wanted control. Richard tried to expose it, and I couldn't stop him from being silenced. I'm sorry." Michael's body froze. "Revived?" Ben leaned forward. "Wait. Did he just say?" Michael's mind spun. His mother hadn't died. She was revived. That explained the funeral, the faint pulse, Daniel's outburst. "She's still breathing." His father had staged everything. But why? The tape continued. Arthur looked haunted. "If anyone finds this, the woman in the recovery photo, Eleanor, she's not dead. Mason took her to a facility in Crescent Valley. He said it was for containment. If she's alive, she's the key to ending this." The screen went black. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Michael whispered, "She's alive." His voice cracked. "My mother's still alive." Ben exhaled slowly. "Then Hale's not just covering up a scandal. He's holding your mother prisoner." Michael stood, his face hardening. "Then I'm going to Crescent Valley." Ben grabbed his arm. "You can't just walk into that facility. It's government protected. Off the grid. You'll get yourself killed." Michael pulled away. "They already took everything from me. I've got nothing left to lose." He turned to leave, but Ben called after him. "Michael, if you make it out alive, bring me something undeniable. The world needs to see it." Michael nodded once. "You'll get it." That night, under a full moon, he parked miles away from the Crescent Valley facility. A massive research compound hidden in the forest. Fences buzzed with electricity. Guards patrolled with flashlights. He crouched behind a tree, rain dripping from the branches, staring at the place where all his nightmares began. He whispered to himself, "Hang on, Mom, I'm coming." And as thunder rolled through the valley, Michael Hayes stepped out of the darkness, ready to break into hell to bring his mother back. The forest was silent, too silent. Every sound Michael made seemed to echo against the wet ground as he crept closer to the Crescent Valley facility. He could see the glow of floodlights cutting through the fog, the hum of power lines above, and the faint outlines of guards pacing along the fence. Somewhere inside that maze of glass and steel, his mother, Eleanor Hayes, was alive. He waited until one of the guards turned away, then cut through a section of fencing he'd weakened with wire cutters. Slipping through, he moved low, using the shadows for cover. Every instinct screamed danger, but something stronger kept him going. The thought of his mother's hand gripping his at the funeral, faintly warm, barely breathing. After several tense minutes, he reached a side door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The keypad blinked red. Daniel's training came back to him. He pulled a stolen access card from the dead guard outside and slid it through. The light turned green. Inside, the hallways glowed pale blue under fluorescent lights. Everything smelled like antiseptic and secrets. He passed through labs filled with dormant equipment, rooms of medical files, strange glass tanks filled with murky liquid. Some tanks had signs of human testing, heart rate charts, names, incomplete data. One name made him freeze: Eleanor Hayes, Subject 09. He followed the trail deeper underground. Each step echoed like a countdown. Then, from behind a sealed observation window, he saw her, his mother, pale but alive, hooked to tubes and monitors, her chest rising and falling slowly. Michael's breath caught. "Mom." He rushed to the glass, his trembling hand pressed against it. "I'm here. I found you." A voice behind him said, "I knew you would." Michael spun around. Mason Hale stood at the far end of the hallway, dressed in a black coat, flanked by two armed guards. His face was calm, confident, like a man who had been waiting years for this moment. Michael's jaw tightened. "You killed my father. You took my mother. You ruined everything." Hale stepped closer, hands behind his back. "Your father didn't understand what we were doing. He thought Project Mercy was evil, but it was salvation, Michael. We created a serum that could bring someone back, not just revive them, rebuild them." Michael's eyes blazed. "You experimented on people." Hale's voice lowered. "We perfected humanity. Your mother was our first success." Michael's stomach turned. "Success? You turned her into a prisoner. She was unstable, Hale said, emotion flickering for the first time. You don't understand. Her body survived, but her mind, her memories fractured. She became something else. Something dangerous. Michael shook his head. You're lying, Hale sighed. You've seen it yourself. She's been alive for years, sustained by the serum your father helped design. That's right, he was part of it before he turned against us. Michael froze. No, that's not true. Isn't it? Hale smirked. Who do you think wrote the formula that saved her? Who do you think begged me to keep her alive after the trial failed? Your father was willing to sacrifice everything, even you, to keep her breathing. Michael's mind reeled. Memories flashed. His father working late nights, arguments between his parents, whispers he was never supposed to hear. Hale took another step. You're not here to destroy Project Mercy, Michael. You're here because you're part of it. Michael frowned. What are you talking about? Hale's eyes gleamed. You were born after the trial. You think your mother's recovery was natural? You were the second subject, the perfected version. Your father used her DNA to create you. Michael's world collapsed. No, that's impossible. Hale pointed toward the observation glass. Look at her. That's why she doesn't age. That's why you survived things no one else could. You are the legacy of Project Mercy, the living proof of our success. Michael's pulse pounded in his ears. You're insane. Am I? Hale smiled faintly. Without you, none of this exists, and that's why you can't leave here alive. Before Hale could give the order, Michael slammed his hand against the control panel beside the observation window. Sparks flew, alarms blared, the containment glass shattered, and his mother gasped as fresh air hit her lungs. Guards opened fire. Michael grabbed a fallen weapon and returned fire, moving fast through the smoke. He reached his mother, pulling the tubes from her arms. Mom, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. Michael, she whispered. He nodded, tears mixing with sweat. It's me. I'm getting you out. She looked past him, fear in her eyes. He's not gone. Mason. He won't stop. Michael lifted her, struggling toward the exit as explosions rocked the hallway. Behind them, Hale staggered through the flames, shouting, "You can't escape what you are." They burst into the storm outside. Helicopters hovered overhead. Michael carried his mother through the mud, clutching the hard drive against his chest. Hours later, he stood on a hill overlooking the burning facility. His mother lay wrapped in his jacket, weak but breathing. The night air smelled of rain and freedom. Ben Carter's voice echoed faintly from the phone in his pocket. "We received the files, Michael. It's out. The whole world knows." Michael looked at the rising smoke, then at the woman who'd been both his past and his purpose. "It's over," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "No, my son, it's only beginning." As dawn broke over Crescent Valley, Michael Hayes finally understood. The truth wasn't just about what his parents had done. It was about what he had become, the son of Project Mercy, the man who crashed a funeral to bring life back from the dead.